In the previous video in this series, we learned how to create Eloquent models to interact with our database tables. And where we saw that put to use was within our seeding system in Laravel. We were able to create some sample data in our database. Expanding on this, I want to continue to talk about Eloquent, and specifically I want to see it put to use for actual features in our application. For example, in our products controller, the way we currently have it set up is we are pulling our products and category data from this sample array that we had hard-coded, and I want to translate this to now get this data from our database. To do this, let's first clean up and get rid of the sample data, as well as these two lines that was extracting the information we needed from that data. We're going to get everything from the database, and where I'm going to start is with our categories. So let's create a variable called categories. And the way we're going to get all of our categories from the database is using our category model. And on this model, I'm going to invoke a query method called all. That should give us all of our categories. Now, in order to use the category model within this controller, I do need a use statement for it at the top. And then just to confirm that this works, let's put a die dump in here to output the categories. And that way we can look at the data and talk about what we need to do with it before we get to actually returning our view. So I'll bring this up in the browser to go over to my products page, and we can see the result of that die dump statement. We received an object of this type collection. This is a special data type within Laravel that we will often see when we're querying with our models. We're going to get this collection data type returned. And what this is going to contain is not only our data as a result of our query, but also really useful methods for working with that data. Where we can see the data within the collection when we output it like this is if we look at the items index, and you can see we've got an array and we've got 3 elements in this array, and each element is an instance of our category model. If we take a closer look at any of these instances, we'll see a bunch of meta information about the model, but if we want to look at the actual data, we're going to find the attributes index, and if we expand on that, we can see the data that we have for the fields for this given category. So here is our health category when it was created and updated, as well as its ID. So that's the data we have to work with in regards to our categories. Coming back to our code, let's now talk about how we're going to get our product data. And you'll recall that within this method, what we're trying to do is we're trying to filter down a list of products based on the requested category. So to accomplish that, I want to set up a query using my product model. So let's say products. We're going to reference our product model, and just like our category model, we need to make sure it's accessible within this file. And using this model, we're going to invoke a Eloquent query method called where we can filter by fields within the corresponding table. So in this case, I want to filter products by the category ID. So that's the field name I'm going to reference. And then following that, the second argument I'm going to give to the where method is the particular category ID I'm looking for. Now, in order to get that category ID, I have a little bit of work to do because the information I have about the requested category, you recall it's coming in as part of our route parameter, and it's going to be the category name, for example, tech, health, etc. So what we need to do is, based on that information, we need to figure out what is the corresponding ID for the requested category. And the way I'm going to find that is I've got all of my category information in this previous query. So I'm actually going to search within that collection of results that I got from this query to find the requested category. And then within that information, I could get the category ID. Let me show you what I mean. Let's set up a variable called category ID. And where we're going to get the ID is from our categories collection data. But we want to filter things down. So we're going to use a collection method called first where. That's going to get us the first result in this collection of data where some criteria is met. And the criteria we're looking for is we want to find the categories where the name of the category matches the category that we're getting as part of our route parameter. Now this line as written will return me, or it should return me, an instance of the category we're looking for. But we're not looking for the entire category instance. We want just the ID. So to drill things down even further, I'm going to append on this just the field name I'm looking for, and that's just simply going to be ID. All right, now once we have that, we should be able to complete our query down here, where we're going to get all the products that match the requested category ID. And then just to finish this off, I'm going to append a query method called get. That is what's going to actually execute the query with the given constraint. Let's output some of this data just to make sure we're getting the results that we're expecting before we turn our attention to the view. So I'm going to start by dumping out the category ID, and then I'll do a die dump of the products. And let's go back to the browser and see what this gets us. Now, before I run this, though, note our URL. Right now, we're just going to /products. And if I were to run this again, it would cause an issue because if we look back at our code, we are trying to filter categories based on the category we're getting as part of the URL. So if we don't have that, this is going to cause an error. We'll address that in a moment, but just to get around it for right now, I'm going to add a category. So let's load up our products under the tech category. And here's the output of our dump statements. So we can see that the category ID it found for tech was 2. And then here are our results. We get, again, that collection type. It has 3 items in there. So we have 3 products under the tech category. Just to skim through here and look at the actual data, we can confirm that it makes sense. So that is one of our tech products. So that makes sense for the first one. And we'll look at the second one as well. Fitbit Fitness Watch, that was also under tech, and we can assume that the third product is correct as well. So now that we've confirmed the data we're retrieving looks like what we're expecting, let's go back and get rid of our debugging statements and turn our attention to the view. I'm going to go ahead and run this, and we'll see what adjustments we need to make. And specifically, we're going to need to make adjustments because we're getting, in essence, the same data we were getting before when we were just searching via our hard-coded array of data. But the data structure itself is going to be a little bit different. So we're just going to have to make a few tweaks in the view. To see what I mean, let's go back and refresh it with the view loaded. And the first thing we can observe is under our list of products, we're no longer just seeing the name of the product. We're actually seeing all the details from the product because we ran a query against the database. We didn't do any sort of filtering down of that data. We're basically getting everything there is to know about a given product, the ID, when it was created, updated, the name, as well as the category ID. So let's filter things down a bit. Let's go into our view. So I'm going to open up my products.blade.php. Here's my for each loop where I'm going through each of my products. And rather than just outputting all the information about the given product, I'm going to specifically just output the name, just so we get the same sort of output we were getting previously. All right, that looks much better. Let's do the same thing for our list of categories. Again, you can see we're getting all the information that we could get from the database, but we really just want the name of the category here. So back in our view, here's our for each loop for our categories, and we're going to extract just the name. And then again, we'll check our output, and that looks good as well. Let's go ahead and check out our other categories just to make sure that it's working for them as well. So here's our health category. We can see the products for that. And then finally, our books category. So with everything looking good there, let's rewind and address the situation where we're going to just /products without a category at the end of it. If we load it as things are currently written, we get an error about a null ID. And that's coming from this line right here because we're trying to search amongst our category data for a category with a specific name. But this category name that we're looking for at this point, it is null. So this query is not going to execute as expected. To address this, coming back to our code and our code within our products controller, what I'm going to do is I'm only going to try to execute this code where we get a category ID and we get specific products if we actually have a category as part of our route parameter. So I'm going to say if category, in other words, if category is not null, then go ahead and run this code. All right, and then the other thing I want to add here is I just want to set a default value for products because if it doesn't end up being set, in other words, if we don't get in this if statement, we will get an error down here because we'll be referencing this products variable, which doesn't exist. So just at the very beginning, I'm going to initialize it, and I'm just going to set it up as a null variable. And then if we do have products, it will be set to whatever they are, but otherwise we won't get an error down here. Let's see how this changes things. Coming back to the browser, we're going to refresh it. And excellent, we're no longer seeing that error, and the user is presented with a list of categories that they could then choose from, at which point they would actually see products. And with that, we're basically right back where we started from in terms of how our application is working. But of course, behind the scenes, we're now getting our data from the database, which is what we want. We're not getting it from that hard-coded array. And along the way, we learned some important things about working with Eloquent and interacting with our database in Laravel. Let's do a quick recap of that. Of course, we saw a couple examples of querying our database using our models. So we did a very broad query here where we referenced our category model and then we use the all query method to get all the categories. We got a little bit more specific down where we search for our products. We use the where constraint method, where we are filtering our results where a particular field matched a particular value. And then, of course, to execute that query, we did use the get Eloquent method. And all, where, get, these are just a small sampling of the methods we get with Eloquent. I'll include a list of all the methods on the screen right now. And of course, you can check out the documentation for more details. There's so many ways we can construct our queries and so many useful methods that Eloquent provides to do so. The other thing we learned about Eloquent and working with models is that oftentimes when you're running these queries, the data type you're getting back is a collection. Right? We saw that first when we queried our categories. We got this collection data type, and within that we saw our results were just instances of what we were querying for. So we saw we had an instance of a category class, and we had that 3 times for each of the categories that we got back. And then we saw that we were able to put that to use because we passed that data to our view. And then in our view, when we were iterating through those category objects, we could use these dynamic properties to access different values for the fields for the given category. In this case, we were specifically referencing the name field. And then finally, the other important thing we saw with collections is that once you get a collection of data from the database, you could further filter it down. And that's what we did here to get the category ID. We basically queried on our existing collection of categories data to get just the specific category we were looking for. And the takeaway there is just understanding how useful this collection data type is, because not only is it giving you your data back, it's also giving you a bunch of utility methods for working with that data. And again, I'll list those methods on the screen here, but check the documentation just to familiarize yourself with all the tools you have available when working with collections. So hopefully this additional practice with Eloquent has been useful to see how you go about interacting with your database within Laravel applications. Building on this, in the next video, I want to show some examples of actually creating data in our database. And as part of that, we'll get into form processing. I want to show you how we can set up a form to actually add new products. And then, of course, we'll use our models to persist that data to our tables.